Okay, uh, before I get started, I'll just remind people that I traveled to Morocco 5 different times and ended up in total out there over 3 months. But that's split into 5 different visits. Um, I wasn't just sitting around doing nothing when I was out there. I learned a lot. I observed, excuse me, a lot. And being autistic, I remember things. I keep things in my mind. And so I'm going to kind of touch upon observations that I made when I was traveling in Morocco. Now, before I start, because I'm sure that when I do, there may be people that say, well, why haven't you done something about it? Well, in the last 6 years, I have been a victim of terrorism. My reputation and character has been completely assassinated beyond repair. My name has been completely destroyed. The situation I'm in is still pretty bad, and I'm just trying to get on through that. And I have had many of my human rights removed from me in the last 6 years. So I'm not in a position to be able to do anything to help myself in the interim, let alone being able to do anything to help others. So I just wanted to say that before I start, because if the situation was different in life, I may have been actually doing something to along these sorts of lines. But nonetheless, I'm happy to talk about it and want to. I was never really given the opportunity to talk about different things because um, people didn't give me a chance. Like I said, I went out there 5 different times and saw different things, and I don't see why I shouldn't talk about it. Now, whatever some dastardly fiend did in Marrakesh does not reflect the fact that I have learnt all these things and want to share them, because these are things that happen in other countries around the world as well. And especially more so, I mean, it's not just Muslim countries, but I'm going to talk about areas where women are looked upon as if they're not capable of doing things which could elevate their existence, actually, to be perfectly honest, because they very much are. So I saw a lot of different things out there, and I'm going to cover a few different topics, a few different things that I noticed and what I thought about as solutions. Um, Now, so thinking along these lines, but using the observations that I made in the different times that I actually travelled to Morocco, where I did actually see firsthand extreme poverty. I did see firsthand environmental consequences of water redirection, pollution, and desertification on not just the people but the ecology. But that's going on a slightly different tangent. What I'm going to talk about first and foremost is something that I witnessed a lot of every single time that I travelled out to Morocco. Witness does not mean that I was participating every single time, okay? I witnessed a lot of alcoholism, serious alcoholism, some of which in some regions you can understand actually became an issue after the land had been destroyed and damaged. So there was no longer farming, there was no longer these things in terms of employment. People ended up getting stuck. And a lot of times you do find this, and this happens in many countries in the world, an issue will arise out of that. Many places in the world, including England, I mean, you have to think about when industries closed down, like when the mines closed down, the effect that had on so many people up and down England. So these areas where I noticed there was a big issue with employment, and along with that issue of employment is the alcoholism, are areas where there has been an effect on different types of work that people would have been doing. Now, in Morocco, it's a Muslim country, so they don't put solutions or anything in place, any sort of thing in place to try to deal with alcoholism, because it's just seen as, it's forbidden, it's haram, you're going to go to prison if you get caught with it, but most people just don't bother even looking. The thing is, that attitude is stupid, because there could be an area where not only do you actually have a chance to rehabilitate people's alcoholism and train them in new skills and new areas where they will be needed in terms of work, but you also are using facilities where you're employing people to do these jobs too. So you're creating employment, and you're kind of also giving the training. The thing is, countries, like many countries around the world, where there is corruption and where there is problems with money being utilized by officials to do something that's actually beneficial overall. So usually when you speak to an official, they want everything in fiscal terms. It must all be in fiscal terms. So you have to start talking about GDP. And it sounds cold and it sounds heartless. But when you are going to confront and say, look, actually, you could apply this and actually create more employment and actually deal with an issue there, there's still always going to be some that fall through the net. But you're going to get most of those people is because they don't have an opportunity. And then to rehabilitate from their alcoholism and at the same time be trained in a skill that is going to be needed so they have future work is something that is beneficial in the long term. Now, all of these things need an initial outlay, but at the same time, in the long term, what a country is actually doing is improving its GDP. When it does that, it's able to borrow more money, it's able to do more things. And that's how you have to talk when you talk to somebody at the higher levels of these things, because they don't think about the individual when it comes to what the individual's going through and opportunities that are not there. So an individual is lacking in their life. They're thinking of a bigger picture and it's money orientated. So you have to come and you have to say, hang on a minute. These things will improve the GDP of your country. So I saw other things. Now, I noticed while I was in Marrakesh, very first time I went to a park called the Cyber Park. And there's a small display about the environment and rubbish and things like that that's been put there by the king. It's what apparently Morocco is doing its bit to help the environment. However, to the contrary, that is not what I saw. I saw an incredible amount of issues in terms of rubbish in the environment. And what I noticed mostly was a lot of the rubbish was recyclable. Mostly plastic that is recyclable. But there's no recycling facilities. There's no infrastructure to be able to have a recycling facility in various regions where you get more of a plastic problem, which is what I noticed down in the desert area. Some of that plastic is buried deep into the sand in areas. These have long-term effects on water supplies and on the environment and ecology. But plastic is a recyclable and it's also a commodity. It's not worth as much as gold, no, given. But in the quantities that they've got everywhere, it's definitely a commodity, and it's well worth investing in infrastructure to set up recycling plants in various locations and training people properly. There's recycling plants around the world. You're telling me that you can't send some people in to go and get some proper training to be able to teach others. Again, it creates employment, cleans up the environment, which is also good on a global picture in terms of geopolitics. You're doing your bit to help the environment. Every country's got to be looking like that, haven't they? Creates jobs as well. For those that are not working within the tourist industry and in a lot of these areas down by the desert, there is very little for them to do. Yet there is actually something for them to do. And also it's something that tourists notice, all this rubbish, especially when you see how much of that is recyclable. And it's a waste because it is a commodity. It does have a worth. Like it's well worth investing in the infrastructure and recycling plants and giving people jobs, paid jobs, to get it out of the ground. There's enough of it for it to be worthwhile. I mean, crikey. That's going into the water supplies, which are already dwindling in that area. The water levels have dropped significantly. A lot of the water is so low, it's become completely salinated, impossible to drink. Some other water supplies have become polluted as well. So, it's just doing whatever you can to preserve whatever may be left, and there's not much left. So it's kind of like a massive whammy there when it comes to those sorts of things. And observing that, and this is where it's like, right, well, you can observe the problems, but are there feasible solutions that someone up there who's thinking about everything in fiscal terms is going to be going, actually, we need to be doing this? There's lots and lots of different things. Now, I came across, when I was travelling out there, different Berber cooperatives. And these Berber cooperatives are advertising themselves as things that are set up by women for women. And in a couple of cases, that is true. However, in the majority, it is not true. And I visited, as I said, I visited a couple of places. And for one example, is carpets. They are woven by women, and they are then sold to like a cooperative, or the women work with the cooperative, and then they will get paid a portion for each carpet. But it's a portion, it's not the whole cost, and those carpets are on sale for a lot of money to people who are visiting the country. And as I said, a lot of these cooperatives are actually really run by men, because there hasn't really been given to these women business skills. How to do those things at that level, and to run a cooperative for themselves. Schooling out there you have to pay for it, from what I saw. I don't think it's free. So these sorts of opportunities are much harder to get hold of for the average person, and that leaves large pockets of society, of the people out there, in a situation where they can't actually kind of get out of that. They can't kind of build that. And I'm thinking there are solutions that are also beneficial to the environment. And the recycling thing is something that country has got so much plastic waste buried into lots of its ground that I'm telling you, you're going to go for years. You might as well mine the plastic. That's how deep it's gone. So, seeing different situations, one of the things I noticed a lot out there was women work hard and are willing to put the work in. Now, women who weave carpets can also tie rebar together. There could be situations where someone who's philanthropic, or a company, a multinational company, is doing its bit, could actually train properly building to women. Because I actually went to a building site, and I actually saw the way that it was dealt with, and I was shocked. The person putting the electric wiring in flip-flops, smoking a cigarette, drunk. People actually moved in on the bottom floor while the concrete was still being poured for the top floor. Building skills are not difficult to learn, actually. And I actually have to say that when I travelled over there, I'm going to say more so in the desert regions, I found the women to be a lot more stronger in their characters than in Marrakesh. They were a bit more subservient. So the thing is, like, I also met a desert woman, a businesswoman, who had actually come into Europe to gain a degree. So we're not talking about people as stupid. We're talking about there's nothing there. And this is something I noticed. Women do work harder out there than the men do. And these sorts of skills are unbelievably, like what a family brings in for weaving a carpet compared to what one woman's going to bring in, or three women are going to bring in, tying some rebar together, working for a multinational company that's building in Morocco, or, companies that are actually applying the proper building skills rather than just thrown together. I found it, I've just found that there were so many areas that opportunities could be had to improve the people's way of living, and then also improve things overall. This reliance on the tourist industry is quite a shambles, because there's so much more out there. And I think there's so many areas where there's big holes that could be filled with some really good things. I mean, if I was philanthropic, I had some issues in Morocco. And if those issues didn't happen and I was philanthropic and had tons of money, then I would probably get a top-notch women's team together of women's builders who are highly skilled, and take them out there to train women to do that sort of thing. Because at the end of the day, this mentality that women are not capable, it actually can hold back. And this is me thinking fiscally, if I was talking to someone at the top who only cares about money, it really lessens the GDP when you've got half the nation's women. And they're capable. And they're strong. And that's another thing to teach women business. Some women out there do have business skills, but still quite lacking. It could go that step further, jumping back to the beginning, the alcoholism. You've got to move the religion to one side. The only way you're going to deal with that is rehabilitation centres, and you'll probably find the majority of people are alcoholics because they didn't have any opportunities or the training for the sort of work that is in their areas. So these sorts of things are worth investing in, and if you're a country, you should be investing in opportunities for the people, and thinking at the same time that the more you're helping the people, you're actually helping the GDP. And at your level, when you think about things fiscally, and I'm talking at the government's level, or geopolitical level, that is logical that the more people have, the more opportunities. It increases things, and at that level, that's where people get happy, because they can start borrowing more money, moving more money around. I did notice a lot of other things. I did notice areas where so many things could be put in place properly, I don't need to go any further. I think what I've discussed already is food for thought. And the pollution thing, I mean, really, why wouldn't you want to set up recycling, infrastructure for recycling, create jobs and clean that land? Why wouldn't you want to do that? There are other areas when I want to talk about the environment, I'll do a different video. But anywho, that is some of my thought processes for today.